Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be exploring some excerpts from the book of Genesis today,
Sounds good.
specifically the stories of Adam and Eve's descendants,
Go.
all the way through to Joseph.
All right.
So we're going to be looking at some really well-known tales,
Yeah.
but hopefully we can uncover some details and interpretations you might have missed.
Absolutely. I mean, these stories, they've resonated throughout history for a reason.
Right.
They're not just, ancient history. They offer profound insights into human nature,
Hmm.
the consequences of our choices, and just the complexities of our relationship with the divine.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump right in
Okay.
to that very first story, Cain and Abel.
Right.
The ultimate tale of sibling rivalry taken to a tragic extreme.
Yes.
But what really stood out to me this time around was that detail about the offerings.
Right.
Why do you think God favored Abel's offering over Cain's?
Well, that's a question that sparked, debate for centuries.
Yeah.
The text tells us that Abel offered the firstlings of his flock,
Right.
which, suggests a sacrifice of something really valuable to him.
Mm-hmm.
Cain, on the other hand, simply offered fruit of the ground.
Right.
And so this could point to a deeper difference in their intentions.
Interesting.
Was Cain just kind of going through the motions
Yeah.
while Abel poured his heart into it?
It makes you think about what we consider valuable, right?
Yeah.
Like, is the true measure of an offering really in its material value, or is it more about the spirit behind it?
I think that's exactly it. The idea of intentionality.
Yeah.
It's echoed throughout Scripture,
Right.
in a lot of spiritual traditions today.
Yeah.
What we bring to the table matters,
Mm-hmm.
but the WHY behind it matters even more.
Right.
I think so, yeah. And it's interesting because even after this, perceived rejection, God doesn't turn his back on Cain.
Right.
He actually warns him,
Yeah.
telling him, sin is lurking at the door.
But that he has the power to master it.
That's such a crucial moment, because it establishes this concept of free will.
Yeah.
And free will underpins, so much of the biblical narrative.
Well,
Even
yeah.
when faced with temptation,
Yeah.
we still have the ability to choose our path.
Right.
We're not just puppets.
Right. But in a tragic twist, Cain succumbs to jealousy and commits the first murder.
Yes.
And his infamous question to God, am I my brother's keeper?
Right.
It's almost as well known as the story itself.
Yes.
It really makes you think, are we responsible for each other's well-being?
It's almost like a deflection of responsibility, a denial of that inherent connection we have as humans,
Yeah.
to our fellow beings.
Yeah.
And his actions just shatter that connection.
Right.
And the consequences ripple outwards.
And the consequences are immediate. Right.
Yes.
Cain is punished, but he's also given this mark by God for protection.
Right.
Often misunderstood, but it's clearly meant to safeguard him,
Yeah.
not to curse him.
I think this detail is so fascinating because it shows that even in judgment, there's mercy.
Mm-hmm.
God holds Cain accountable for what he did,
Yeah.
but he also ensures his survival.
Right.
So it kind of sets this precedent for this balance
Yeah.
of justice and compassion
Right.
that we see play out in so many of these stories.
Yeah. Speaking of judgment and compassion, let's move on to the story of Noah and the flood.
Okay.
It's such a powerful image, this whole world cleansed by water.
The flood represents this complete reset,
Yeah.
wiping clean the slate.
Right.
And it speaks to the destructive consequences of just unchecked wickedness.
Mm-hmm.
But it also holds this promise of renewal and a fresh start.
Right. And with this fresh start comes a covenant between God and Noah.
Yeah.
And that beautiful image of the rainbow,
Yeah,
symbolizing God's promise to never again destroy the world in such a way.
exactly. That covenant is significant because it establishes this relationship,
Mm-hmm.
built on promises and obligations.
Mm.
God commits to preserving creation.
Right.
And, humanity is expected to live in a way that honors that commitment.
Right.
It's a theme that we see in various forms, across a lot of faiths today.
Yeah.
This idea of a sacred agreement
Right.
between the divine and humankind.
Within the story of Noah, there's a passage that's particularly challenging
Yeah.
the curse of Ham.
It's a story that, sadly, has been misused and misinterpreted throughout history
Yeah.
to justify really horrific acts of
Right.
oppression and discrimination.
Yeah.
But if we look at the passage carefully, it's clear that the focus is on the consequences
Mm.
of disrespecting one's parent.
Right.
So Noah curses Cain and Ham's son
Right.
after Ham sees his father naked and then tells his brothers about it.
It's a reminder of the importance of, filial piety and familial obligations,
Yeah.
but also a reminder of how crucial it is to interpret Scripture
Yeah.
with care and sensitivity,
Absolutely.
considering the historical context,
Yeah.
and avoiding interpretations that promote harm or hatred.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can't selectively pull passages out of context to
Ah.
justify our own agendas or prejudices.
Yeah.
It's important to approach these texts with humility
Right.
and a willingness to engage with them in their entirety.
Yeah. Speaking of engaging with the text,
Yeah.
let's move on to the call of Abram,
Okay.
who was later renamed Abraham.
Yes.
This marks a major shift in the narrative, doesn't it?
Definitely. It's like we're zooming in on one particular family line,
Yeah.
and with it comes a whole set of promises and challenges.
Right.
The emphasis on faith in this story is just striking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Abram's called to leave everything familiar
Yeah.
and journey to this new land
Right.
that God will show him,
Yeah.
trusting in this promise
Yeah.
of a great nation
Mm-hmm.
and countless descendants.
And all of this when he and his wife are quite old.
Yes, and childless at this point.
Yeah, it's a monumental leap of faith. And it highlights the idea that God often works through, the seemingly impossible.
Yes, and that theme of the impossible continues, even as Abram faces moments of doubt and fear.
Right.
Remember when he lies about Sarai being his sister?
Oh,
Because he's afraid that the Egyptians will kill him to take her?
it shows that even those chosen by God are human,
Yes.
prone to mistakes.
Insecurities.
Right.
Exactly. And it highlights that our relationship with the divine isn't about perfection,
Right.
but it's about acknowledging our flaws
Mm.
and striving to walk in faith despite them.
Yeah.
And even in Abram's lapse of judgment,
Yeah.
God protects him and Sarai,
Hmm.
sending plagues upon Pharaoh and his household until the truth is revealed.
Right. Almost as if God is saying, I've got your back,
Yeah.
even when you mess up.
Yes.
Speaking of divine intervention,
Yes.
there's another intriguing encounter in this section.
Oh.
Abraham's meeting with Melchizedek.
This figure is just shrouded in mystery.
Yeah.
Described simply as a priest of God Most High.
Right.
He appears to Abraham, breaking
Mm.
bread and wine,
Mm.
and blesses him.
Right.
And what I find really interesting is that Abraham offers Melchizedek a tithe,
Right.
a tenth of all the spoils of war.
Interesting.
It suggests this recognition of Melchizedek's spiritual authority,
Yeah.
and it foreshadows the practice of tithing
Right.
in the Israelite tradition.
It does raise questions about the nature of spiritual authority
Yes.
and the importance of honoring the divine through offerings.
Yes.
It's almost like a hidden gem in the text
It is.
that invites us to explore a deeper layer of meaning. And
Yeah.
that deeper layer of meaning is then amplified in the covenant God makes with Abraham.
Yes.
We have this vivid imagery of a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch
Yeah.
passing between animal carcasses.
That's powerful.
It's a powerful visual
It
and representation of this pact being forged,
Mm.
sealing God's promise to give Abraham's descendants the land of Canaan, a land that will shape the destiny of the entire Israelite nation.
So pivotal.
It's huge.
Yes.
And yet, within that promise, there's also this foretelling of hardship.
Yes.
God reveals that Abraham's descendants will face trials,
Mm-hmm.
becoming aliens in a land not theirs,
Yeah.
and enduring oppression for 400 years.
It's a reminder that the path to fulfilling God's promises isn't always easy.
No.
There will be obstacles,
Right.
suffering along the way.
Right.
But the ultimate fulfillment of the covenant remains steadfast.
Right.
It's a message of hope that resonates even today.
Absolutely. And that message of hope is tempered by the complex family dynamics that begin to unfold within Abraham's household.
Right.
Sarai, still unable to conceive, encourages Abram to have a child with her Egyptian slave, Hagar.
Yeah, this decision, while understandable in the context of their culture, it sets off this chain of events that's just fraught with tension and jealousy.
Right.
Hagar gives birth to Ishmael, who receives a promise from an angel that he will also become the father of a great nation.
But Sarai's jealousy just intensifies after Ishmael is born,
Yeah.
and she mistreats Hagar,
Yeah.
eventually driving her into the wilderness.
It's a painful reminder of how human emotions even within a chosen family,
Mm-hmm.
can lead to conflict and suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And yet, even in this difficult situation, God doesn't abandon Hagar.
he doesn't.
He appears to her through an angel,
Mm.
offering comfort and reassurance.
Yeah,
He promises to multiply her descendants and make Ishmael into a great nation.
he does.
It's a powerful reminder that God's compassion extends
Yes.
even to those who are marginalized or mistreated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it lays the groundwork for this complex and often fraught relationship
Yeah.
between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael
Right.
that
Yeah.
we see play out throughout history.
It's almost as if this one family's story
Yeah.
becomes a microcosm of the larger human story,
Mhm.
filled with conflict,
Yeah.
love, betrayal, and ultimately a search for belonging and purpose.
Exactly. And those themes continue to play out in the next story we encounter,
Okay.
the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah.
It's a story that often raises questions about divine justice and mercy.
Absolutely.
It's a tale that's both terrifying and thought-provoking.
Yes.
We see these cities portrayed as just, bastions of wickedness.
Yeah.
But before their destruction, we witness Abraham pleading with God
Mm-hmm.
to spare them
Yeah.
for the sake of any righteous people who might be living there.
Abraham's boldness in interceding for these cities is remarkable.
Yeah.
He starts by asking if God would spare them if 50 righteous people could be found.
Right.
And then he just keeps bargaining,
Right.
lowering the number until he reaches 10.
It shows just a deep concern for the fate of others,
Yeah.
even those who may be engaging in wickedness. And it reveals God's willingness to show mercy,
Yes.
to withhold judgment,
Yeah.
if even a small remnant of goodness can be found.
It's a powerful exchange.
Yeah.
That highlights that tension between divine justice and compassion.
Right.
And while the cities are ultimately destroyed,
Yeah.
the story leaves us pondering
Right.
the nature of sin,
Mhm.
the possibility of redemption,
Yeah.
and just the lengths to which God might go
Right.
to preserve those who are committed to righteousness.
Speaking of righteousness,
Yes.
let's shift our focus to the story of Isaac and Rebekah.
Okay.
Abraham, determined to find a wife for his son
Mm-hmm.
from his own people,
Yep.
sends his servant back to his homeland to seek out a suitable match.
Right.
Seems like there's a real emphasis on maintaining their cultural and religious identity.
Yes. There's a concern for preserving the purity of their lineage
Yeah.
and ensuring that Isaac's wife will uphold, the faith and traditions they hold dear.
Right.
And the servant finds Rebekah,
Mm-hmm.
a woman known for her kindness and hospitality,
Yeah.
drawing water at a well.
It's a beautiful story of providence and God's guidance. It reminds us that even seemingly chance encounters
Yeah.
can be orchestrated by a higher power.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting you mentioned the well,
Yeah.
because it echoes a scene we'll encounter later with Jacob
Right.
meeting Rachel at a well.
Yes.
It's almost as if these wells become these,
I love that.
sacred spaces,
Well, that's-
places where divine appointments take place.
Yes, these subtle details
Yeah.
that just add layers of meaning to the text
Right.
and invite us to make connections we might otherwise miss.
Yeah.
And speaking of connections,
Yes.
the story of Isaac and Rebekah takes a dramatic turn
Right.
with the birth of their twin sons,
Yeah.
Jacob and Esau.
Here's where things really start to heat up in terms of family drama.
Yeah, we have the incident with the birthright,
Right.
where Jacob, the younger twin,
Yeah.
takes advantage of Esau's hunger
Mhm.
to trick him into selling it for a bowl of soup.
Right.
Yeah,
This act reveals a lot about Jacob's character.
it does.
He's shrewd, ambitious,
Yeah.
willing to manipulate circumstances to get what he wants.
It does raise all sorts of questions about ambition, destiny,
Yeah.
and the ethics of getting ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
And the story escalates further when Jacob, with the help of his mother,
Right.
deceives his elderly father, Isaac,
Exactly.
into giving him the blessing intended for Esau.
The consequences of that deception are huge,
Yeah.
driving a wedge between the brothers,
Mm-hmm.
setting the stage for years of conflict and estrangement.
Right. And in the midst of all this drama,
Yes.
we have this stunning moment of divine revelation.
Beautiful.
Jacob's dream at Bethel.
Yes.
The image of a ladder connecting heaven and earth.
Yeah.
With angels ascending and descending. It's so vivid.
It's powerful.
and evocative.
It's a powerful symbol of the
Yeah.
connection between the divine and human realms.
Right.
A reminder that even in our earthly struggles,
Yeah.
we are not alone.
Right.
God reaffirms that covenant made with Abraham,
Mm-hmm.
promising Jacob the land and countless descendants.
And Jacob so moved by this encounter,
Yes.
makes a vow to God,
He does.
promising to serve him and make that place,
Mm-hmm.
Bethel, the house of God,
Yes.
if he returns home safely.
It's a pivotal moment in his spiritual development,
It is.
marking a deepening of his faith
Yeah.
and a commitment to aligning his life with God's will.
Yeah.
And it sets the stage for the next chapter
Right.
in his journey as he continues on to Haran,
Mm-hmm.
where he encounters Rachel at a well.
Right. Just like his father's servant encountered Rebecca.
These parallels in the narrative,
Yeah.
they're so fascinating.
They're amazing.
They hint at these recurring patterns in the human experience,
Yeah.
particularly within families.
It's as if history is rhyming.
Yes.
With certain themes and motifs just echoing through the generations.
Exactly.
And once again, the well serves as this
Yes.
place of significant encounter.
Yes.
Jacob falls instantly in love with Rachel and agrees to work for her father, Laban, for 7 years in exchange for her hand in marriage.
Right. But of course, things don't go quite as planned.
As they often don't.
On his wedding night, Jacob is tricked into marrying Leah,
Oh, wow.
Rachel's older sister.
Talk about a curveball.
It sets off this whole series of events
Yeah.
involving jealousy,
Mm-hmm.
rivalry,
Yeah.
and these complicated marital arrangements.
Right.
Jacob ends up marrying both sisters
Right.
and also takes their maidservants as wives,
Wow.
ultimately fathering 12 sons
Yeah.
who will become the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel.
It's messy.
It
It's complicated. It's
Yeah.
very human.
is.
And yet, despite all the drama,
Yes.
we see God's providence at work.
Yes.
Even in the midst of human fallibility and,
Mm.
and questionable choices,
Yes.
God is fulfilling his promise to Abraham,
Yes.
bringing forth a multitude of descendants through Jacob.
Precisely. It speaks to that larger idea that God can work through our imperfections, even our outright mistakes,
Yeah.
to bring about his purposes.
Right, and that theme of divine providence continues as we delve into the story of Jacob's departure from Laban.
Yes.
After 20 years of working for his father-in-law,
Yeah.
he decides to return to his homeland with his family and possessions.
Right. But there's a lot of tension between them.
Yeah.
Jacob feels cheated,
Mm-hmm.
and Laban is suspicious of him.
Right.
And it all comes to a head when Rachel steals her father's household gods.
It's such a strange detail.
It is.
What do you think was going through her mind?
It's a bit of a mystery, isn't it?
Yeah.
The text doesn't explicitly state her motivations. Was she
Uh-huh.
trying to protect her family's future?
Mm-hmm.
To take back what she felt her father had withheld?
Yeah.
Or was it something deeper?
Yeah.
A symbolic attempt to reclaim a sense of power or connection to her past.
It's one of those details that just adds depth and complexity to
Uh.
the story.
Yes.
Inviting us to, consider the motivations of the characters
Mm.
and the ripple effects of their actions.
Absolutely.
And it leads to this tense encounter between Jacob and Laban.
Yes.
Laban pursues Jacob, accusing him of theft and deception.
It's a standoff filled with raw emotion.
Yeah,
But ultimately, they find a way to part peacefully,
right.
making a covenant
Mm-hmm.
to not harm each other.
It's a powerful moment of reconciliation,
It is.
demonstrating that even in the midst of conflict,
Yeah.
there's possibility for peace and understanding.
That covenant, marked by a heap of stones,
Right,
it serves as this physical reminder of the agreement they've made.
right.
And it highlights the need to find ways to coexist peacefully,
Yeah.
even when there have been past hurts and betrayals.
That's a message that resonates especially in the context of families or
Yeah.
communities that have experienced division and strife.
Yes.
It's a reminder that healing and forgiveness are possible,
Absolutely.
even in the most challenging of circumstances.
It is possible.
And as Jacob continues his journey,
Yeah.
he has this extraordinary encounter
Right.
where he wrestles with this mysterious figure.
This wrestling match is pivotal in Jacob's life.
Me too.
It's this physical and spiritual struggle
Yeah.
that leaves him forever changed.
Mm-hmm.
The mysterious figure, understood to be God or an angel of God,
Right.
renames him Israel,
Right, yeah.
meaning he who strives with God.
So powerful.
It's a new identity forged through struggle
Yeah.
and this deep encounter with the divine.
Right. And this transformation is further solidified when Jacob returns to Bethel,
Yes.
that place where he had his first dream.
Yes.
God instructs him to get rid of all foreign gods
Mhm.
and to purify himself and his family.
It's a symbolic act of cleansing,
Yeah.
a rededication
Hmm.
to the one true God.
It's almost like he's shedding the remnants of his old life,
Yes.
the baggage of his past,
Yeah.
and stepping into a new chapter marked by, like,
Yes.
spiritual clarity and commitment.
And at Bethel, God reappears to Jacob, reaffirming the promises made to him and his ancestors.
Right.
God declares that he will be the father of a nation
Right.
and that his descendants will inherit the land.
It's a beautiful moment of confirmation,
It is.
a reassurance that Jacob is on the right path,
Yes.
aligned with God's purpose for his life.
And yet, amidst these blessings and promises, there's also heartbreak.
Right?
Jacob's beloved wife, Rachel, dies while giving birth to their son, Benjamin.
It's a stark reminder of just the fragility of life,
It is.
the unpredictable nature of our human experience.
Even those who are chosen and blessed by God
Mm.
are not immune to suffering and loss.
Right.
And this loss, it profoundly impacts Jacob,
Yeah.
shaping his relationships with his sons and influencing the events that unfold in the next part of the story.
Right. As Jacob ages, he
Yeah.
settles in Canaan, the land promised to his ancestors.
Right.
But it is his son, Joseph, who
Yeah.
becomes the central figure.
Yes.
In the next chapter of the narrative.
Joseph, the 11th of Jacob's sons, and the firstborn of his beloved Rachel,
Right.
he becomes the object of his father's favoritism.
Right.
And this favoritism, it triggers this jealousy among his brothers, setting into motion a chain of events that will test the very fabric of their family
Yeah.
and ultimately lead to their descent into Egypt.
So we're about to enter into this captivating and heartbreaking story of
Yeah.
Joseph and his brothers.
Yes.
A story that just delves into the depths of human emotion,
Yeah.
from the bitterness of betrayal
Yeah.
to the transformative power of forgiveness.
Absolutely.
What stands out to you from these stories we've discussed so far?
I'm struck by how these seemingly ancient tales still resonate so deeply today.
I agree.
They grapple with universal themes that we all experience, family dynamics,
Right.
ambition, the allure of power,
Yeah.
the consequences of our choices, the longing for belonging and purpose,
Right.
and woven through it all
Yeah.
is this thread of divine providence, this sense that even in the midst of our messiness,
Yeah.
God is working to bring about his purposes.
It makes you realize that these stories aren't just about what happened thousands of years ago, but about who we are as human beings.
Yes.
And the timeless struggles we face as we navigate our own journeys of faith, family, and purpose.
I agree. And the story of Joseph, well, it picks up right where we left off, delving into these timeless themes of family and ambition and the often unpredictable ways God works in our lives.
Right.
From the very beginning, we see young Joseph, just 17 years old,
Right.
caught in this crosshairs of sibling rivalry.
Yeah.
He's clearly his father's favorite,
Yeah, he is.
receiving that special long robe with sleeves.
Right. It's more than just a piece of clothing.
Right.
It's a symbol of Jacob's love and preference.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine how that must have felt for his brothers.
It's a recipe for resentment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And that resentment only grows when Joseph shares a couple of dreams
Oh, yeah.
that seem to suggest he'll one day rule over them.
Right.
We have this imagery of sheaves bowing down
Yeah.
and celestial bodies paying homage.
Wow.
It's as if Joseph's subconscious is revealing a truth that his brothers find both infuriating and maybe a little terrifying.
It's almost like a foreshadowing, but one that they're not ready to accept.
Exactly. And it sets the stage for this confrontation that will change the course of their lives.
Right.
Jacob, oblivious to the tension, sends Joseph to check on his brothers, who are tending flocks near Shechem.
Yeah.
So he's sending his beloved son straight into a dangerous situation.
Oh, yeah.
And the brothers see Joseph approaching, and they seize this opportunity to get rid of him.
Yeah, they really do.
It escalates so quickly from a plan to kill him
Right.
to throwing him in a pit.
Right.
And it's in that moment at the edge of violence
Yeah.
that we see this flicker of compassion.
Right.
Reuben, the eldest brother, intervenes. He persuades them not to shed blood,
Okay.
convincing them to leave Joseph in the pit,
Yeah.
hoping to return later and rescue him.
So there's a glimmer of hope in
Right.
a very dark situation.
Yes, but before Reuben can make good on his plan, a caravan of Ishmaelites passes by.
Right.
And the brothers, they see another opportunity,
Right.
one that's perhaps less violent,
Okay.
but no less devastating.
Right.
Judah, often portrayed as the pragmatic one, suggests selling Joseph into slavery
Wow.
instead of killing him.
Yeah.
It's a decision that highlights this slippery slope of moral compromise.
Yeah, it really does.
They're trying to find a way to ease their guilt,
Right.
to justify their actions, but ultimately they're still betraying their brother.
And they sell him for 20 pieces of silver.
Yes,
That detail always chills me,
it is chilling.
especially knowing how that same price
Right.
will later be associated with the betrayal of Jesus in the New Testament.
Yes, it's like this haunting echo across time.
It really is.
It is, and it underscores the weight of betrayal
Mm-hmm.
and the lasting consequences of our choices
Right.
to cover their tracks.
Yeah.
The brothers concoct this horrific deception.
Right.
They dip Joseph's robe in the blood of a goat
Oh, wow.
and present it to their father,
Right.
leading him to believe that a wild animal has killed his son.
It's heartbreaking to read Jacob's reaction.
It is.
His grief is so raw, so visceral.
It really is.
He refuses to be comforted,
Yeah.
utterly convinced that his beloved son is dead.
And meanwhile, Joseph is transported to Egypt,
Right?
sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. It's a complete upheaval of his life.
Yeah.
Descent into a world that's completely foreign to him.
Right. But even in this desperate situation,
Yeah.
there's a sense that God is with him.
Yes.
The text tells us that the Lord was with Joseph,
Right.
and he finds favor with Potiphar,
He does.
rising to a position of authority in his household.
It's a reminder that even when it seems like everything has fallen apart,
Yeah.
God can still be at work, orchestrating events in ways that we can't comprehend.
It's a beautiful thought.
It is.
But Joseph's integrity is soon put to the test
Right.
when Potiphar's wife falsely accuses him of trying to seduce her.
Oh, yeah.
He refuses her advances,
Mm-hmm.
choosing to remain faithful to his master and, more importantly,
Yes.
to his own moral compass.
Right, but this act of righteousness doesn't shield him from suffering.
Right.
He's thrown into prison,
Yeah.
a victim of injustice and betrayal once again.
It's a familiar theme in these stories.
It is.
The righteous suffering.
Yeah.
Facing trials that seem undeserved.
Yeah. But even in prison, we see that the Lord was with him.
Right.
He gains favor with the chief jailer
He does.
and is given responsibilities that allow him to use his gifts.
Right.
And it's in prison that he encounters two of Pharaoh's officials,
Right?
the cupbearer and the baker.
Yeah.
Both are troubled by strange dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph, with God's guidance, correctly interprets them,
Right.
foretelling the cupbearer's restoration
Right.
to his position and the baker's execution.
Wow.
It's a small moment, but it foreshadows Joseph's own future.
It's like a tiny seed being planted.
It is.
Just a hint of what's to come.
And 2 years later,
Yeah.
Pharaoh himself has this series of disturbing dreams
Okay.
that none of his advisors can interpret.
And wouldn't you know, the cupbearer remembers Joseph and his uncanny ability to interpret dreams.
Yes, he recommends him to Pharaoh,
Right.
who summons him from prison.
Wow. It's a moment of divine orchestration.
Isn't it?
All those years of hardship and suffering.
Yeah.
And now Joseph is standing before the most powerful man in Egypt,
Right.
poised to play this pivotal role
Yeah.
in the nation's fate.
And he doesn't disappoint.
No, he does a...
Joseph, guided by God,
Right.
interprets Pharaoh's dreams,
Yeah.
revealing this coming period of 7 years of abundance,
Right.
followed by 7 years of severe famine.
Right. So his interpretation not only saves Egypt from starvation,
Yes.
but it also elevates Joseph
Right.
to this position of unparalleled authority.
Pharaoh appoints him as his second in command,
Wow.
entrusting him with managing the nation's resources and preparing for the coming famine.
Wow. It's a remarkable turnaround.
It is.
He goes from prisoner to prime minister like that.
It speaks to the power of trusting in God's timing,
Yeah.
even when we can't see the path ahead.
You're sure.
And it sets the stage for one of the most dramatic reunions in all of Scripture.
Oh, yeah.
As the famine spreads, it reaches Canaan,
Right.
forcing Jacob to send his sons to Egypt to buy grain.
And who do they encounter but their long-lost brother, Joseph?
Yeah.
Now a powerful ruler in Egypt.
They don't recognize him at first.
Of course not.
And Joseph, rather than revealing his identity,
Right.
decides to test them.
Wow.
He accuses them of being spies,
Okay.
demanding that they bring their youngest brother Benjamin
Right.
as proof of their honesty.
Okay, so it's a tense situation,
Yes.
fraught with echoes of their past betrayal.
Yeah, the brothers are clearly tormented by their past actions.
Mm-hmm.
They recognize the pain they inflicted on Joseph
Yeah.
and the devastation they caused their father.
Right.
And when they return to Egypt, with Benjamin,
Right.
Joseph orchestrates another test.
Yeah.
He plants his silver cup in Benjamin's sack
Okay.
and accuses him of theft.
Wow. That's a brilliant move, psychologically speaking.
It is.
He's pushing their buttons.
Yes.
Forcing them to confront their own capacity for deception and betrayal.
Yes, and it's Judah, the same brother, who had initially suggested selling Joseph into slavery,
Wow.
who steps forward and pleads for Benjamin's release.
Right.
He even offers himself as a slave in Benjamin's place.
Wow. It's a stunning act of selflessness.
It is.
And a testament to how much he's changed.
It's a pivotal moment.
It is.
A culmination of years of guilt and remorse.
Yeah.
And Joseph, overwhelmed by emotion, can no longer maintain his charade.
Right.
He reveals his true identity to his brothers.
I can't imagine the shock that must have rippled through the room. I know.
Their brother, the one they thought they'd gotten rid of,
Yeah.
is now standing before them, not as a victim, but as a powerful ruler.
It's the ultimate plot twist.
It is.
And in that moment of revelation, Joseph reassures his brothers, telling them not to be distressed by their past actions.
Wow.
He recognizes that God had a purpose in orchestrating these events,
Yeah.
sending him ahead to preserve life during the famine.
It's a powerful statement of forgiveness
It is.
and an acknowledgement of God's sovereignty.
Absolutely.
It's like he's saying, what you meant for evil, God meant for good.
Yes.
It's a reminder that even our worst mistakes can be redeemed,
Big tear.
woven into this larger tapestry of God's plan.
And from that point on, the story shifts towards reconciliation.
Right.
Joseph arranges for his father and the entire family to relocate to Egypt,
Mm.
settling them in the fertile land of Goshen.
And the reunion between Jacob and Joseph is incredibly moving.
It is.
It's a moment of healing and restoration.
Yeah.
After years of separation and sorrow, Jacob, overwhelmed with joy, declares, "Enough. My son Joseph is still alive.
Wow.
I must go and see him before I die."
It speaks to just the enduring power of family bonds
Yes.
and the boundless nature of a father's love.
It does.
Jacob, reunited with his beloved son,
Mm-hmm.
lives out his remaining years in Egypt,
Yeah.
surrounded by his family.
And before his death, he bestows blessings on his sons,
Right.
pronouncements that are both personal and prophetic,
Right.
foretelling the future of their descendants and the 12 tribes of Israel.
And in a beautiful act of love and respect,
Yeah.
Joseph honors his father's final request to be buried in the land of Canaan, the land promised to their ancestors.
It's a reminder of the importance of honoring our roots, of
Mhm.
remembering where we come from,
Right.
even as we journey into the unknown.
Right. And Joseph's own life comes to an end in Egypt.
It does.
But his legacy continues to inspire.
Yes.
He's remembered as a man of integrity, forgiveness, and unwavering faith.
Yes.
This shining example of God's transformative power.
Yes. His story reminds us that even in the darkest of circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
even when we face betrayal and hardship,
Yeah.
God can work through our experiences for good.
Right.
His providence guides our steps,
Mm-hmm.
even when we can't see the path ahead.
And speaking of God's guidance,
Yes.
there's a particularly poignant detail in the way that Jacob blesses his sons,
Right.
specifically Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh.
You're talking about how Jacob crossed his hands,
Yes.
blessing the younger son, Ephraim,
Right.
over the elder Manasseh.
It's an unusual act that clearly puzzles Joseph.
It does, but Jacob insists, declaring that Ephraim, though younger, would become greater than his brother,
Wow.
and that his descendants would become a multitude of nations.
It's a powerful reminder that God's ways are not always our ways,
They're not.
and that his blessings can sometimes flow in unexpected directions.
Right.
It's a challenge to trust in his plan,
Yeah.
even when it doesn't align with our own expectations or preferences.
Exactly. And that notion of trusting in God's plan extends even beyond Jacob's death.
Right.
Remember Joseph's final instructions?
Oh, yeah. He basically said, hey, when you guys get out of here, don't forget to take my bones with you.
Right, like don't leave me behind
Yeah.
when you head to Canaan.
Yeah. It's this powerful image of a man who lived and died in a foreign land, clinging to that hope of returning to the land promised to his ancestors.
A testament to his unwavering faith.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
he knew that he wouldn't see that promise fulfilled in his lifetime.
Yeah.
But he entrusted his remains to future generations,
Yeah.
believing that God would eventually lead his people back to their homeland.
Powerful.
And it foreshadows the Exodus,
It does.
this momentous event that'll mark a turning point in the history of Israel.
Yeah. You know, it's incredible to think about how Joseph went from a shepherd's son
Right.
to the most powerful man in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh.
It is amazing.
And yet, despite all that, he never forgot his family or his roots.
What's remarkable is that his rise to power didn't corrupt him. He remained grounded in his faith, and he used his position to save lives.
Right.
Not only his family,
Yeah.
but the entire nation of Egypt.
It's a powerful example of how we can navigate positions of authority
Yeah,
with integrity and compassion.
absolutely.
And when his brothers came to Egypt, desperate for food during the famine,
Yeah,
he could have easily sought revenge
right.
for their cruelty.
He could have.
Instead, he offered them forgiveness and compassion.
That act of forgiveness is so inspiring.
It is.
It speaks to the power of letting go of past hurts
Yeah,
and choosing reconciliation over revenge.
right. Joseph recognized that his brothers were genuinely remorseful, and rather than dwelling on their betrayal,
Yeah.
he chose to extend grace and mercy.
It's a reminder that forgiveness is a gift,
It is.
not only to the person being forgiven,
Right.
but also to the one who forgives.
Yeah.
It frees us from the bitterness and resentment
Yeah.
that can just weigh us down.
It's a powerful message, and one that's particularly relevant in our own lives,
Yeah.
where we're constantly navigating relationships
So,
and facing situations that call for forgiveness,
yeah,
both of others and of ourselves.
absolutely. And Joseph's story reminds us that true forgiveness
Mm-hmm.
doesn't require us to condone wrong actions.
Right.
It's about releasing the grip that those actions have on us,
Yeah,
allowing ourselves to move forward
right.
with a lighter heart.
Joseph's story also highlights another crucial point,
Okay.
the significance of divine providence
Yes.
throughout his journey.
Yeah.
Even during those darkest moments,
Mm-hmm.
Joseph never lost sight of God's presence in his life.
He didn't.
He recognized that God had a purpose for his suffering,
He did.
using his experiences to ultimately bring about good.
Yes. It's a powerful reminder that even when we face hardship and injustice,
Mm-hmm.
we can trust that God is working behind the scenes,
Right.
weaving our experiences into a larger tapestry
Yeah.
of purpose and redemption.
Sometimes those difficult seasons,
Mm-hmm.
they're the very things that prepare us for our greatest callings.
They are?
It's like that saying, what the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good.
Yes.
And while we may not always understand the why behind our suffering,
Right.
we can find comfort in knowing that God is with us
Yeah.
through it all,
Yes.
working to bring beauty from ashes.
That brings us back to the beginning, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
To those enduring questions
Mhm.
of faith, purpose,
Right.
and the often mysterious ways
Yeah.
God interacts with humanity.
These stories from Genesis, while ancient,
Yeah,
continue to speak to us today,
I do.
offering wisdom and insights
Mhm.
that can guide us on our own journeys.
Absolutely.
They remind us that we are part of a larger story,
Yeah.
a narrative that spans generations,
Mhm.
ultimately shaped by a God who is both just and compassionate,
Yes.
powerful and present.
It's been a privilege exploring these timeless stories with you.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us.
Of course.
On this deep dive into Genesis,
Yes.
we hope it sparked some new insights
Yeah.
and encouraged you to continue wrestling
Yeah.
with these profound questions
Yes.
of faith, family, and the enduring legacy of those who have come before us.
Absolutely.
Until next time,